We will not rest until you're held accountable for this crime. And this was a wicked crime, and a crime against women, and a crime against humanity.
What drives a person to conceal their darkest acts, yet leave behind a trail of digital footprints? In the shadows of human nature lies a paradox: our desire for secrecy and the compulsion to be seen. The disappearance of Felicia Johnson raises unsettling questions about trust, technology, and the fragile veil between our curated lives and our hidden impulses. As we dive into this case, we're forced to confront a universal truth. How well do we really know the people we encounter, even in an age where nothing seems beyond our reach? On the outside, 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwobodo looked like anyone else. Full of youth, with a bright smile, a love for sports, and a decent job. A first-generation Nigerian-American, he looked like a postcard of prosperity and the American dream. But if you were to look at his phone, that carefully curated facade would slip away in an instant. On May 13, 2022, officers of the Houston Police Department began to look through Nwobodo's photos on his phone as part of an investigation. What they didn't expect was that the monster inside him would come to light with every swipe. First, they uncovered a photo of a mutilated body. To this day, police haven't revealed who the body belonged to. With another swipe, another grotesque image was revealed. This time, it was a photo of a dead woman. Yet again, police have not publicly identified who it was or where the photo came from. As they continued to look, their stomach churned, and the reality of what they were facing was hard to ignore. There were not one, not two, but 4 deceased women in the camera roll in the cops' hands. It was a devastating, heart-wrenching sight, but it wasn't just the nature of the photos that distressed the police department. It was the realization that they had just let the owner of the phone, Chukwuebuka Nwobodo, leave after only a few short hours of questioning. They had no tabs on him, no way to track him, and no way to get him back to the station. The man with photos of a dismembered woman and internet searches for how to be a serial killer was on the loose. Law enforcement had had him in their grasp, and just when they found out what he had done to Felicia, he was gone.
Crime scene investigators in Montgomery County have confirmed that human remains were found in the Sam Houston National Forest, and it belongs to the missing woman, Felicia Johnson. The 24-year-old had been missing since April of last year.
When Felicia was 5 years old, she was more responsible than most teenagers. According to her father, Kevin, Felicia would set an alarm, wake up, get dressed, make her bed, and come out of her room all by herself, grinning from ear to ear with pride. From the beginning, Felicia was a kind, passionate, hard-working girl with a good head on her shoulders. She spent most afternoon with her childhood neighbor in San Diego, California, doing cartwheels and blowing bubbles. As time passed, Felicia's happy-go-lucky, bubbly attitude only grew. She had a passion for helping those in need and a strong desire to make a life for herself. By the time she was in her early 20s, she was taking on modeling gigs and working at local clubs to build up her wealth and give herself a good living. Life was really beginning to take off for her in early 2022. She had a tight group of friends, was close with her family, and was making good money. She spent the night of her 24th birthday surrounded by people who loved her. It was the cusp of true adulthood, and she wanted to celebrate. So she decided to take a trip to Houston, Texas, to welcome herself to a new phase of life. She spent several days enjoying herself, but early in the morning of April 15th, she fell radio silent. Her friends and family frantically called her. As an avid social media user and someone who clung to her loved ones, going even a few hours without seeing any sign of her was a red flag. By midday on April 16th, less than 12 hours after she cut contact, her family called the Houston Police Department to file a missing persons report. In their gut, her father and stepmother knew something was wrong, and indeed something was. But the Houston Police Department didn't seem that concerned. They told Felicia's family that Felicia would surely turn up soon, despite the family's insistence that this was incredibly out of character for Felicia. They demanded that the Houston Police Department conduct searches for Felicia's phone, trace her last known location, and check security cameras related to where Felicia was staying and where she was last seen. But that didn't happen. The Houston Police Department hardly did any outreach regarding Felicia's disappearance. There were few media broadcasts alerting the public to be on the lookout and come to law enforcement with tips. They did one post regarding her disappearance on their Facebook, and it appears that was the extent of their coverage. Half a country away in San Diego, Felicia's family was panicking. They weren't physically there, and the police weren't listening, no matter how many calls they made. They knew there were no steps being taken to find their daughter, and they suspected they knew why. Felicia's work as an escort, model, and dancer made her a low priority. It's a tragic truth in our society that women supporting themselves with sex work are often disregarded by the police and by the public. Their disappearances are brushed aside and forgotten because people draw conclusions based on their careers. But everyone is worthy of being found. No one deserves to disappear, and no one deserves ill fate because of a harmless career they pursue to make a living. Felicia's family loved her deeply. Her community and her friends needed her. So Kevin, Felicia's father, did the best thing he could think of. If the Houston Police Department were not going to search for his daughter thoroughly, he would hire someone. The family hired a private investigator, who also happened to be a close friend, to pursue leads about the disappearance of Felicia. They knew that, tragically, they were the only ones looking for her. Kevin and the private investigator flew to Houston very shortly after Felicia disappeared. They were in a new city, scrambling for clues anywhere they could find them, with a police station that didn't have their backs. Yet despite this, it only took a matter of days for the private investigator to track down Felicia's movements on the night she disappeared. The night of the 15th, Felicia went to a club in Houston called Cover Girls Nightclub. It wasn't unusual for Felicia to go to nightclubs, like most 24-year-old women. Her family was grateful to have a lead, and it wouldn't be their last. They reached out to Felicia's close friends, who she was in daily contact with, to uncover what Felicia disclosed to them before her sudden disappearance. Felicia's friends revealed that Felicia claimed she was going to the nightclub to get a job as a dancer. In the world of exotic dancing, women will often dance at a club for a single night as a guest act to get cash they need before they move on. It's unknown if Felicia was planning this as a quick night gig or a longer-term gig over the course of her trip to Houston. The private investigator and Felicia's father rushed to the club to ask the dancers, bartenders, and bouncers if they recognized Felicia at all. They revealed that Felicia did indeed come to the nightclub. When she asked to dance for the night, the club told her that they didn't have any spots available. According to the club, Felicia didn't stay very long after she was told she couldn't perform that night. Instead, she left and waited outside the club for an Uber to return to her hotel for the night. But oddly, the path of her phone didn't end at her hotel room. It pinged to a few places around Houston before finally stopping very early in the morning of the 16th. The last known location of the phone was near a tower in Bear Creek Park, a heavily wooded area of Houston. The private investigator hurried there, hoping to find any trace of Felicia. Her phone being there immediately terrified her father and her friends. There was no reasonable explanation for why her phone was in a remote park when it was still dark. When the private investigator arrived at the park, he found more than he bargained for. At the edge of the dense brush, the private investigator discovered Felicia's abandoned cell phone. It was clear that it had been dumped or thrown from a passing vehicle. Tragically, it wasn't just the phone being dumped that made it clear that something horrible had happened to Felicia. The phone, abandoned in the vegetation, was coated with blood. When Felicia's father and family heard the news, they were devastated. They joined each other in prayer for their baby girl, hoping for the best but fearing the worst. By the time Felicia's family and the private investigator discovered Felicia's phone, the Houston Police Department hadn't made any progress. The private investigator and Kevin delivered the phone to the police department, urging them to take action. Seeing the blood-covered phone and realizing that the investigation had started without them, the police department launched into action. Kevin was terrified that his daughter was forced into human trafficking. Human trafficking is nothing like it appears in the movies, when women are snatched off the street and forced to do sex work. In reality, trafficking usually occurs to people who are already vulnerable, like people who are participating in sex work, homeless, struggling with addiction, or otherwise excluded. Human traffickers specifically target people on the fringes of society in order to further control them. Kevin feared that because of his daughter's profession, someone had taken advantage of her, assuming that no one would be looking for her. Often, traffickers will seek out people without any strong connections because then there is no one to notice their absence or the changes that happen to them. If Felicia wasn't so loved, that may have been the case. If no one had been pushing for justice for her, her phone could very well still be sitting in the forest to this day, undiscovered, and her killer could still be living in the very house where he killed Felicia. Kevin and the rest of the family launched a public campaign to get Felicia's disappearance as much exposure as possible. They publicly addressed the mayor, demanding assistance in finding Felicia. The mayor never responded, but a Texas representative helped in the search for Felicia. In a plea over the radio, Kevin spoke directly to Felicia, saying that he would stop at nothing to find his baby girl. Kevin didn't stop at anything. And still, the journey to find Felicia was far from over. Finally, police launched their investigation in earnest. They gathered footage from the nightclub where Felicia was last seen, showing her getting into a car with an unknown male. Reportedly, she had scheduled an Uber, but when the car took too long to arrive, a nearby man offered to give her a ride to her hotel. Felicia accepted. For a moment, police believed they had located the man who would link them to her, but then they checked footage at the hotel that Felicia was staying at, and that theory crumbled. Around 3 a.m., Felicia was seen returning to her hotel and heading to her room. A short time later, she was caught on camera, leaving her hotel and getting into an Uber. Police would have to look into the history and messages on Felicia's phone to uncover where she had gone, and when they did, a heartbreaking chain of events shocked everyone. In the early morning of the 16th, just before she left the hotel, Felicia messaged a man on Snapchat. The man offered her $500 for the night together, and Felicia accepted. Felicia had been posting ads on her social media and on the escort site, Skip the Game. It was on that site that the man who offered her $500, 28-year-old Houston local Chukwuebuka Nwobodo, discovered her. Nwobodo had been on the police's radar in the past. In one incident, he had allegedly tried to assault a woman in his car. When the woman fought back and tried to run away, he chased after her. Finally, he gave up. The woman initially reported this to police, but backed down before further pressing charges. It's important to note that this is tragically common in cases of assault. It can force people to relive the trauma that they've been through in the public eye, which can bring on even more problems at an already vulnerable time in their life. Nwobodo walked away without anything public on his record, but no one thought he would be that lucky this time. On May 13, 2022, police conducted a traffic stop on Chukwuebuka Nwobodo in order to take him into custody and present him with search warrants for both his vehicle and his home. Little is known about the interview between law enforcement and Nwobodo. What is known, however, has been more than enough to convince the public of Nwobodo's guilt. Police delivered the search warrants, but it took time to conduct them. Nwobodo was questioned and, after a few hours, released because all law enforcement had was a pocket warrant on him. Inside his vehicle, the police found latex gloves, a shovel, a large kitchen knife, a 9mm handgun, and receipts for a myriad of cleaning products. In addition, there was blood in the back seat and the trunk. In his home, things grew even more disturbing. Large amounts of blood were discovered in the hallway and the bedroom. The blood was a positive match for Felicia. On his phone, the discoveries were stomach-churning. Nwobodo had made a series of horrible searches, including most forested part of Houston. How to permanently delete search history? Can bleach destroy DNA? What does bleach do to blood? What does vinegar do to blood? Does vinegar destroy blood DNA? How to get away with murder? How to kill without getting caught? How to be a serial killer? The last message, combined with the photos of dead women on Nwobodo's phone, painted a chilling picture. The images of the women have yet to be publicly released, and police have so far only disclosed that they contain no helpful metadata. As these discoveries were made, stacking up evidence against Nwobodo, he vanished. In June of 2022, he was officially charged with Felicia's murder, as well as tampering with evidence. Yet the police still had a problem on their hands, and Felicia's family had yet to get closure. The amount of blood found in Nwobodo's vehicle indicated that Felicia was almost certainly dead, but her body had been discovered. As the months ticked on, the family never stopped fighting. They pushed for people to continue looking and never lost hope that they would bring their beautiful, kind daughter home. They continued to believe that somehow, some way she would return to them alive. But tragically, that wasn't the case. On February 7th, 2023, two hunters went on a hunting trip to Sam Houston National Forest. Sam Houston National Forest is the most dense, lush area of Houston, a place that would certainly come up if you were searching for the most forested part of the city. The couple was hunting near the Flamingo Lakes area when they discovered a trash bag oddly discarded in the thick brush. When they opened the bag, the sight inside was devastating. It was a woman's torso, horribly decomposed and clearly purposefully severed from the rest of her body. They called law enforcement, who arrived on the scene and almost immediately knew who the body belonged to. Inside the bag, there was jewelry matching what Felicia was wearing when she went missing. They called the family, who quickly returned to Houston for the formal identification. The torso did indeed belong to their beloved daughter. The rest of her body has yet to be found, and law enforcement discovered evidence in Noboto's home that he killed and dismembered her in the bathtub before disposing of her body. A few days leading up to the murder, he was caught on surveillance footage buying trash bags, gloves, and an electric saw at a local hardware store. The body-matching dismemberment done by a saw was the final piece of evidence that painted a full picture of what happened. Felicia's family was devastated, and they had every reason to be. Police had initially brushed Felicia's disappearance off as nothing more than a party girl running away. The investigation was delayed because they refused to look into it. It was only once Felicia's father hired a private investigator who found the phone speckled with blood that law enforcement began to take Felicia's case seriously. The slow pace of the investigation not only allowed a dangerous individual to walk free, but also left Felicia's family devastated. Knowing that the man they believed took their daughter's life had been within reach, only to slip away due to delays, was a bitter pill to swallow. The failure to act decisively has left her family and the public in a state of painful uncertainty as the search for Noboto continues. Felicia's case has become a powerful symbol of the urgent need for faster and more decisive action in missing persons cases, particularly those involving vulnerable women. Advocacy groups have rallied behind the Johnson family, using Felicia's story to highlight the importance of swift investigative work and the immediate collection of forensic evidence. The delays in her case serve as a tragic reminder that every moment matters when someone's life is at risk, and what that person does for a living shouldn't determine their worth. The Johnson family has become vocal advocates for reform, pushing for better training and resources for law enforcement agencies, especially when it comes to investigating cases of missing women of color. Felicia's story has sparked a broader conversation about the systemic failures that allow such tragedies to occur and go unresolved for far too long. Nearly 2 years later, Noboto still has yet to face justice for taking Felicia's life from her and robbing the world of her light. Very little information arises if you search for Noboto on any search engine. There are no police pages dedicated to him, aside from one deep within the Houston Police Department site that hasn't been updated since 2022. Even searching if he has been found displays few results. There are no countrywide bulletins, no pages for him on the FBI or Texas government website, and almost no coverage of the case. How hard is he being looked for, and how hard is Felicia being advocated for, if people can't even find any information about Noboto? All the evidence leads to Chukwuebuka Noboto, a man who was so desperate to be a serial killer that he looked up how to be one on the internet. And yet, it appears that little public outreach is being done to locate him. How many more women are at risk because so few people know to be looking for Noboto? Noboto is described as a black Nigerian man who stands 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighs approximately 260 pounds. There is little information about his family or where he could have fled to, but there have been accusations that he fled to Nigeria. Thank you, armchair detectives, for following me through this case. What did you think was the most shocking aspect of this case? Where do you think Noboto could be hiding? Let us know in the comments down below, and remember to subscribe. If you like this video, then you may be interested in the story of Sabrina and Robert Lyman, the perfect couple hiding a dark secret. Keep sleuthing, and until next time.